But at the moment, the MENA region is the most exciting region, despite all the challenges that we have. It's the first time I tell this story, I think.
Can one decision completely alter your destiny? How do you pivot from spectacular failures to remarkable successes? In this episode, our guest Mohammed Chbib shares an incredible journey, starting his first business at 12, navigating a near 25 million deal collapse, and learning invaluable lessons from the boardroom of McKinsey to building billion-dollar startup in the Middle East.
While most 12 years old were playing games, you already started your first business. Can you share a little bit more about it?
At the age of 12, I was already very money driven. And one thing I learned quite early on is my dad would always give me money. So it's not a challenge, And he is an immigrant to Germany, or an immigrant in Germany, who had to build everything himself. So at the age of 12, I decided I don't want money from him anymore. I want to earn my own money. And what I've done back then is I just bought used bicycle. First one was 40 Deutschmarks, which is equivalent to 20 euros. 40 Deutschmarks, and I think I sold it for 60 or 65 3 weeks later. And then I bought 2 bikes, and I sold one of them and kept riding one, and so on and so forth. And then after, I think, 2 years, I started assembling my own bikes, buying parts from factory outlets, and assembling my own bike. I was the richest kid.
That was your time in Germany, all of this time?
Yes, born and raised there.
And after your college days, you created an online marketplace for the plastic industry in Europe. That's a weird curveball, no?
Something, again, very money. So I had one of my mates in university, he created Rocket Internet. Back then he created his first internet startup, sold it, I think for $50-something million to eBay after a couple of months. And I felt I needed to copy that to make equal money in a short period of time. So create something quickly, copy paste it from the US to Europe, flip it in no time, sell it and make money and stop working. That was at the age of 24. Very smart. So I chose an industry that I'm very passionate about, as you can imagine, the plastics industry. So literally I had absolutely no idea. I was just, there was no Google, so I can't say I was Googling. So I was Alta Vistaing, or I don't know how you call it. And I found startups in the US that were flourishing and growing and raising funds, and then chose one of them and said, you know what? I don't want to do B2C because everyone is doing B2C. I'm not a creative person, so I didn't find or generate ideas that would make sense. And I just copy-pasted this stupid thing.
But what exactly the problem you're trying to solve in this plastic industry market?
So basically what happens is you have the plastics processing industry, right? Think about a car, right? It has parts that are covered, right? And covered with plastics usually. And you need to buy resin in order to produce these plastic parts, mold them. And so we thought that those plastics processing companies would benefit from buying on a platform like ours in a reverse auction format to press the price. So our target audience is plastics processors, their procurement departments, and we would invite the suppliers and make them bid on a big project.
Okay.
And we would drive down the price through reverse auctioning. Now, it turns out, because we didn't do our homework properly, turns out that the supply market is very, very, how do you call it? Concentrated, right? So you have PP, you have PE, you have PS, you have all the different types of plastics.
Yeah.
And each type has maybe 1 or 2 suppliers globally. How do you run a reverse auction on one supplier?
You can't.
This was the mistake, right? So biggest failure is not to understand the value of a business model for all participants in the market. Obviously, the value that we suggested to the procurement guys was good. Let's run reverse auctions for you and you will get cheaper product. But the supplier said, you know what, let these kids, these 25 to 30-year-old kids play around. We know our buyer. Let them run around this auction for a couple of days. Then we call our buyer and say, hey, you idiot. You want to produce? Yes, no. And that's literally what happened.
How did you take this failure at 24?
Oof. First of all, we pivoted very quickly.
That's good.
Long story short. We raised funding. I had this idea that I copied. I assembled a team. We managed to raise funding. Then September 11 came. On the morning, I think, of September 11, before the attacks happened, we sold our technology, shut down the company, gave our investors back 2 million euros that we still had because we believed that the market was dying. So we came out with a black eye.
So you almost made it?
No.
No.
I wouldn't say I almost made it. I think we made it because the learning experience we had there was phenomenal. From assembling a team to fundraising to, and then the stuff that we learned along the way. We had VCs, different VCs, conflicting VCs, aggressive, non-aggressive. We rejected term sheets because the other term sheet was higher. So I rejected a term sheet from SAP.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I had talked to the founder himself, Hasso Plattner, and he basically referred me to his VC.
Yeah.
And they made us an offer, and we took another offer because it was slightly better, terms-wise. Hindsight, that was the most stupid decision, because SAP has a network, has an experience, would have taken us to Silicon Valley rather than being in Europe, etc. There's so many things that you learn. So I would say we made it. This was what nurtured the growth of the coming years.
One last thing about this experience. What do you think is the lesson that stuck with you throughout your career from this experience? Because it was very early on. Yeah.
I had a burnout of a week where I literally locked myself up. I had to fire 30 people at the age of 25. And all of them were
devastating.
All of them were older than me. All of them only joined because they were convinced in me personally. And so 1 week I locked myself up, didn't pick up phones, nothing. Like people were knocking on the window and I was like, I'm not there. That was not a learning. That was just devastating. Like the biggest learning that I had from that experience is never, ever listen to your VC when they tell you what experts you need to hire for your company or how an industry works, unless they are from within the industry and ex-entrepreneurs. The VC had told us hire senior people from within the plastics industry. We spent about €1 million €1 million Deutschmarks back then on headhunters, hired industry experts for sales and business development. I was the only one at the age of 25 selling. They didn't manage to sell one single project. But they were experts from within the industry. Now you can tell like we hired the wrong guys, but at the end of the day, they had a network in the industry that they did not activate because they were not able to sell the vision of a digital company. They were industrial people. And the VC was so pushing to this. So biggest learning that I have is if you're an entrepreneur with a vision, with a passion, and with an energy level, just do your thing. Be very diplomatic when you talk to VCs so that they don't stress you out in board meetings, etc. And try to accommodate for requests, but then come back and say, this is why I wouldn't do it, 1, 2, 3, and make sure you perform better.
As a product manager, I'm always on the lookout for brands that align with my lifestyle, and Tonic Grind is one that truly stands out. Tonic Grind is more than just coffee. It's where art, lifestyle, and coffee intersect. They offer premium, sustainably sourced beans that elevate your daily coffee experience with the rich, flavorful brews. What I love most is their dedication to thoughtful sourcing and craftsmanship. Beyond exceptional coffee, Tonic Grind is committed to fostering a vibrant coffee culture in the UAE, supplying top-notch beans to local cafes and businesses. Follow Tonic Grind on Instagram. This is a brand you'll want to watch.
After you sold the company, you came back to why you came back here?
We got rid of the company pretty much. And I think got rid is the right word here. And then I had an option to join a corporate. Right? You need to make money as a young kid, like student loans and God knows what. Or what you do is you stay within the startup industry. And I wanted to stay within the startups. And my 3 co-founders all went into corporate world. I refused to, so I stayed in the startup world. I advised companies. I freelanced a little bit. One of the projects took me to Jitex 2003.
In Dubai?
In Dubai, first time ever. And I came here, and I remember like 11:30 at night, I drove up this tunnel to Sheikh Zayed Road because I was staying at the Shangri-La, which has just opened, soft opening. And I came out and I saw these skyscrapers and I didn't believe I was in Dubai. I didn't believe I was in an Arabic city. And but I was so excited to see an Arabic place with the energy of Dubai, with the infrastructure that it seemed to have.
That's back in 2003.
That's 2003, yeah. Sheikh Mohammed was not there yet. He was there, but he was not in charge. And then I was at Jitex, and my background is German, right? So Germany has Cbib, the biggest IT show in the world, back then in Hanover. It ceased to exist now. Because Jitex took over this thing. So I came to Jitex and I'm like, whoa. Well, Cbib looks like a toilet, like compared to Jitex, like literally, right? And I was super excited and I decided to stay. So I just extended my hotel stay. I moved from Shangri-La to Emirates Towers and stayed there for 8 months.
What was the most surprising thing that you found in Dubai beside like the skyscrapers?
whoever you talk to in Dubai back then, locals, non-locals, were up to something. Like whatever they taught you in school, especially in the Western world, they tell you like America, the land of opportunities, land of the free, God knows what. You come to Dubai and you're like, why not? It's possible. We will do it. That was for me the most exciting part, that whoever you talked to in Dubai had some sort of project, right? There was no startup world back then at all. And so I was not keen on the startup space in Dubai yet. I wanted to get to know people before I do that. But this excited me and I wanted to come here and I wanted to stay. So I started listening to opportunities in Dubai.
And you joined McKinsey for approximately 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it very surprising. Again, I love my McKinsey friends, but someone who have this entrepreneurial spirit, how did you manage to stay in McKinsey for a big time?
There's a misconception. McKinsey is a highly entrepreneurial firm.
Okay.
Highly entrepreneurial firm. The guy who opened the Dubai office, for example, opened an Indian office before, right? And so people can decide, I want to do this, put value forward and effort into it, and it will work. There's so many ways of getting things done. And I think there's endless opportunities in McKinsey to shape stuff that is second to none, at least to my time. I don't know how it is today, right? So that's the second thing. The third thing is, I wouldn't have stayed if I hadn't seen two things. Number one is, would I have massive impact with my work?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm very impact driven. And second thing is, does it have impact on my life as well? And I literally had the feeling, because I was always the superhero wherever I went, and in the startup world and God knows what, always very, very loud and very active and very ahead of the curve, if you will. But at the end of the day, I was not satisfied because I felt I didn't know enough and enough techniques, enough frameworks, etc., to get things done the proper way. And then I joined McKinsey and I was humbled.
You were humbled?
I was extremely humbled because everyone in the room was smarter. Everyone, literally. And now that was the day one, right? Day 100, I would say, I figured that they're all smart, but they're not smarter. Day 1000, I would say I figured that I'm much smarter on the human side of things than probably 80% of the people. And 80% of the people are on the intellectual side, probably smarter than me, but the human side matters more. So you have this evolving curve, if you will, while you're in the firm. You do exciting things, different clients, different regions, different sectors, but you learn along the way and you see that, you know what? And I think Barack Obama said something. Once you have access and a seat to the table, you figure out those sitting at the table are no special.
What do you mean you said you were smart on the human side? What did that mean?
I touch people. And this is how I get things done, right? There is this conception in consulting in general, and a lot of people say you need to go there, you need to pressurize them, get things done. Go call him, make him do things. Call the client, push him, they will get things done. I don't think so. I think make the client like you, convince them of why it adds value to his or her life, and they will get things done. Pressure doesn't help. It maybe scares people for a while, but at one point they will not be scared anymore and then they will stop supporting you. So what you need is continued support even after you leave. You want things to be impactful after you leave. And you learn that over time.
How were you someone who had a successful company, who have raised money 3 times, be there one-on-one with his boss, like, no, you're not performing here, you're performing here, you should do this, you should do this. How did you handle that? You were 30 years old at the time, no?
Yeah, I was 30 when I joined McKinsey.
31, okay.
30 years old. And I didn't handle it very well, to be honest.
You struggled from this as well?
Yeah, day one, like people would come to me on my project, and the guy who was a partner on my project or became a partner, he was my age, exactly my age, but he was 6 levels above, 5 levels above. And he was extremely good at this McKinsey thing. And I thought I was good at anything. And I wasn't. But I didn't know because I didn't have any self-awareness. And at one point he grabbed me and he said, dude, it doesn't work. And he said it in very harsh words. doesn't go down very well with someone of my big ego.
How did you say, no, maybe they're right?
When you hear it 3, 4, 5 times from different types of personalities that you all respect intellectually,
Okay.
you start thinking. I think that is the massive thing. So I was lucky. I was in a quite quiet project in Oman back then. And I got feedback from this guy. And I calibrated with my team members. My team members was a Dutch guy from the, I think, Amsterdam office back then, who's a headhunter now. Very amazing guy. Another guy back then from the Holland office. There was a girl from the Dubai office. She was Egyptian, who studied in the US. So 2 Europeans, 1 Arabic lady, 2 European guys, 1 Arabic lady, then this Arabic partner guy. They all told me the same. And then I grabbed the Mexican client, senior client guy, and I asked them all for feedback.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I played back first what I was told. And this sounds now like a very good approach. No, it was not a good approach. It was an ego approach. I'm like, hey, this idiot told me, blah, 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 blah. What do you think? And you can sense when someone tries to stay polite, right? Okay. But at the end of the day, they agreed with the guy. And you feel it. And then you start thinking. And then you play it back at home, like with your friends, with your wife, etc. And you're like, maybe I'm not that superhero. Maybe I have the potential of a superhero, but I'm not. Because if I'm not, and I asked myself, why did I join McKinsey in the first place? And I joined because I felt I needed to develop. Right? But when you come in and you see that people tell you how to do things that you have done successfully for years, and they want you to do it in a very specific way, and you're a free bird, right? You can't be told how to do things.
Yeah.
But then you calibrate and you're like, okay, a couple of people I respect tell me the same stuff. I came here in the first place because I wanted to learn. That's the only reason why I joined that place. Maybe I should start. And I was lucky that I got this harsh feedback from the guy because it clicked. And then I started enjoying it. I really started enjoying it.
What exactly that you learned in McKinsey that was so valuable?
The most important thing is there are 3 things. No matter who asks you what, if you don't want to seem like you're a junior analyst, always answer there are 3 things and then structure your thinking. That's the simplest trick. And that's one of my key things when I coach people. I'll tell them, look, the way you communicate tells everyone whether you're ready for leadership or not. It's the verbal communications that will decide whether you're perceived as a leader or you're perceived as a time waster. Right? So there are 3 things that's literally the most important thing I've ever learned at McKinsey. The second thing I would say is you've seen leadership in action. They're all strong intellectual people. But the people that really I like remembering hindsight is the people that have what McKinsey called followership. Right? So you don't become a partner when, if not everyone who worked with you in the past would celebrate you for becoming a partner. Everyone is interviewed by a reviewer and everyone needs to say, yes, I'd be very proud to work with this person again. Right? And this concept of followership, I adopted it to 1,000%. Like my only leadership, like KPI has become followership. If people follow you, you have done the right thing as a leader on multiple dimensions, on commercials, on people leadership, on. And I think that's the second, maybe probably even more important than the 3 things is followership. When you get people to back you and to follow you and to support you, then I think there's no limit to you.
And how did your experience in McKinsey shape your leadership?
I had a lot of tough situations on the clients. And I think one of the trainings you get when you become a project manager is they help you analyze psycho profiles. Basically, in your head, you create an MBTI profile of people back then. And there's a lot of challenge to the MBTI concept, but there's similar concept, whatever it is, right? And what they say is every different personality type, call them captain, call them steward, whatever, they have different influencing techniques that work better or less, work well or less on a certain personality type. And they teach you on how to influence different characters in such training. And I think that is something that helped me understand that, number one, a typical standard thing that I mentioned earlier in our conversation, threatening, for example, never works. It's one of those influencing techniques that never works with no personality type, ever, right? And you learn that and you're like, whoa, why am I applying that? Why do I go to people and pressurize them and threaten them? And threatening with third parties is even worse. I'm going to tell your CEO if you didn't do this or that. It doesn't work. Now, when you ask me what have you learned in terms of leadership, I think I've learned this, influencing techniques, matching personality types. And the second thing I've learned is there are certain people that tell you stuff, but they don't apply it themselves. There's so many senior people running around in that firm, as in any other organization, that tell you don't do this, but they do it themselves all the time. Sometimes internally and externally, they're super nice, but internally they're super aggressive. With clients, they're a certain character, but internally facing, they are different characters. So I learned that a killer to any culture and to any value system in an organization is if you have 2, 3, 4 rotten apples. Even if you have like 300-400 people in an office, 2-3 rotten apples are enough to destroy it.
After McKinsey, this itch of starting your own startup, then you jump into Sukkar. How does that like?
When I decided to leave the firm,
Yeah.
literally the same day, I think, or the same week, I was contacted on LinkedIn by someone who searched for a couple of things, and I was the only one who popped up. And we had a call, and he's like, look, we have this startup in Dubai run by a guy called Saigin Yalchin. You might know him. He owns Sell Any Car, and he's a very known personality in the MENA region. And he needs support because he's a single founder. And I felt this was the opportunity to get back to what I love doing, backed by a European investor and an Arabic investor. So the other investor was Jabbar Internet Group, which is Samih Touqan, the guys behind Maktoob, behind Souk, etc. So I felt this was a very powerful mix. And these are pioneers. I would consider Samih probably the first really internet entrepreneur next to Rabi Ataya.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's high praise.
It is. I mean, the guy is, I would put him on the same level as Fari Ghandour, like literally. And these guys were there. So I was like, okay, there's a good chance. And then there's a young kid who was 10 years younger than me, who's the founder. Met with the guys the first time, second time. And I was like, wow, this is a good setup. I didn't believe in the business model, to be honest. Not too much. It was fashion. I'm not from the fashion industry. And was this Guild.com clone, which I believe doesn't add long-term value. This flash sale concept. You have people that hunt for the lowest price. So it's very difficult. The Middle East doesn't offer logistics and tax systems and custom systems that are efficient. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be operationally very difficult. We optimized it a lot after I joined. Scaled it 6x, I think, within 1 year. And then we sold it to Souk. And again, like I would probably use the word got rid of it in a certain way, but we got a good exit.
I know an investor who came from the fashion industry and he never invests in fashion because like Mahmoud, I know where the bodies are buried. It's a really tough market. Mm-hmm. How did you survive those challenges?
Question is, did we really survive those challenges? I think we navigated somehow with the money that we had until a point where we had to decide, are we able to raise funding to continue with this business model, or do we need to switch to another business model? And we were lucky that behind Jabbar as well was a big support from Tiger Global in the US, right? And these guys have seen all these business models around the world, right? And they were pushing towards the general merchandise Amazon model. So Souk was just by far the better business model, at least after their, I think, third or fourth pivot. God bless Ronaldo, because the persistence at changing business models until they found the right one, I think was outstanding back then. And I think they were just the superior business model. They lacked fashion because they were only electronics back then. So it was a component that we gave them that opened the categories, I think, or expanded the categories from the pure electronics play to something more than electronics. And I think 3 years later, they sold to Amazon.
And what was the learnings from that as well?
Oof. I think, again, so I joined McKinsey because I felt I didn't know enough. Mm-hmm. I came out of McKinsey and I thought I was the superstar again, right? So I joined the startup world in the Middle East with people that have been entrepreneurs before me even, successful entrepreneurs with more than $100 million exit. But literally back then, everything they advised us to do, I was blocking. Because I just didn't comprehend long term back then that it makes sense to question what I'm doing right now for the benefit of the whole enterprise or the whole firm, right? So we hired a lot of people. Hindsight, I would say I overhired probably.
That's so good.
Yeah. I mean, we had a big warehouse and then we had a studio. We had like a couple of things that I would do differently today. And we had a business model that is not long-term sustainable. It worked for a certain while because it was novel. But then Namshi.com had opened as well in the same industry back then, the same time. And this was a far better model, especially because they were backed by the guys from Germany, by the Zalando guys, right? And I was pushed back on advice, like, hey, be conservative with the hires, check the business model. Maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. And instead of that, I was going head to head against my board in certain decisions and questions and arguments. And I think the biggest learning that I would have is be much more self-aware that whatever you have decided might be wrong, right? But then I think again, like I think it was normal after a stint in a firm like McKinsey, where you are a consultant getting into organizations where you're perceived as being the person saving them or improving them. So as a consultant, you have this natural arrogance of coming in with smartness, right? And I took this into the startup world, and it took me about a year to shut this off. And I think first learning is it should never take a year to question yourself. You need to do it much faster. And today I question myself much more frequently.
But isn't the job of a leader to lead without questioning himself?
No.
What's the job of a leader then?
No. The job of a leader, number one, is to have a vision, right? And number two is to create followership behind this vision. And number three is to execute. Now, this execution part, you should question all the time. I think on the vision part, you need to question it from time to time. The strategic component of translating this vision into a strategy and to execute the strategy, that's stuff that needs to be questioned regularly. And I think the best leaders that you have, they gather people around them that are equally smart or smarter, and they question them all the time. Not paralyzing the company, but at least have, from time to time, very candid conversations about the approach, about certain big mistakes that you're doing. And then a very good leader is the one that stands there and says, you know what, we've been doing this and this is wrong because of 1, 2, 3. We've made 1, 2 adjustments. And then continue towards the vision. Now, if you have a vision that is not really great enough to carry people behind you, probably not the right leadership, right? But when you say, I want to, I don't find an example now, but like, yeah, I have this grand vision, but I'm very poor at execution. That doesn't make sense.
So first, how can I create a vision?
What is your vision?
Empower the MENA startup ecosystem. Because I think there's so much tremendous here. And we're going to talk about this, but once the Kareem acquisition happened, people from all over the world were like, hey, there's something interesting going in the MENA region. Let's go investigate. And this acquisition created 100 created 100 millionaires. And those millionaires created their own startup. And this ripple effect elevated the entire ecosystem, and elevated Dubai, elevated Abu Dhabi, elevated Riyadh, all the different cities. So that's my vision.
Empower the MENA tech ecosystem.
Yes.
But that's a great vision. How do you come up with that? Why didn't you say something like, I want to make entrepreneurs better in the MENA region? Because it's too small. What you want is something that you put out there, that you come back to in 10 years and it's still valid.
Yeah.
Correct? And this would be still valid. Because no matter how great the ecosystem becomes, you can make it even better. So that's a very good vision statement. And I ask you because I read it. Like so. Right? So that's how you come up with the vision. You're like, okay, if in 20 years someone is still looking for a North Star, would it still be there? That's the way I think about it, right? And I think, yeah, I can give you 100 examples of big corporates that have good vision statements, less like amazing vision statements, but it's up to you as well. It needs to be tied to your passion. And the way you just explained the ecosystem after the Kareem transaction, Kareem Uber transaction, I think speaks for itself, right? You're super passionate about this tech ecosystem, and that's what you do every day.
But how can you communicate this vision to the rest of your team? Do you just put it on the board and like, guys, this is my vision, follow it? Or do you co-create it to make them have ownership of it? Because creating a vision is one thing, but I think communicating and have people actually believe in it and rally people out of this one vision, I think this is only a select few have.
That takes me to what are the most important character traits of a leader or a startup founder, right? And I think one of them is you need to be a salesperson.
Salesperson?
Yes.
I'm screwed.
You need to be able to sell.
I'm screwed.
You're not. You sold me coming here, right? You sold so many people, great talented people, to be on your show, right? So you have the sales skill, right? And the sales skill helps you hire people. The sales skill helps you sell product, right? And the sales skill helps you raise funding. 3 things, right? And I think that's one of the most important things. Now, there's techniques on how to develop vision statements. And you can give it to an editor and say, do it, copywriter, editor, blah, blah. What I tend to do is I hire the first couple of people and tell them my vision in the hiring process, right? And when you have 20, 25 people, you gather them in a room and say, hey, I want you to come up with a framework for our values, our vision, and our mission. And whatever they come up with, we take. So that's just one thing so that you create ownership and stewardship in the company. The second thing, and that's equally important, every all-hands meeting. And for me, all-hands meetings are religiously important. Every all-hands meeting, every town hall that you run needs to be an energy booster for this vision. So you as a CEO or you as a founder, as a COO, CMO, whoever is on stage in front of everyone needs to be breathing this vision all the time and give an update on what we're doing in terms of working towards this vision. And I think we've done it so many times, especially when you talk about Tajawal or AlMosafer, is literally every town hall was an excitement, like boost for everyone, because they saw that we had a purpose and we're doing something. We want to transform something and we want to give something to the people in the region, etc., etc., etc. Same with Kareem. You can talk about Kareem operations the way you want, but one thing they did actually do in a very, very good way is and I mean, you've seen Mudassir. I mean, this guy knows how to sell vision.
Oh, heck yes.
More than anyone else, right? It's crazy, really. Like, you listen to him, it's like, yeah.
He's been talking on this vision for 20 years, and every time it feels like it's the first time I'm giving this speech.
Yes. And I think that is what makes great leadership in creating companies at the end of the day.
So 1 is vision. 2, we discuss fellowship. And I've asked around, you're pretty much a charismatic person. So I've asked, because you talk with people in a HR different way, you talk people in executive a different way, you speak even the delivery driver and the different way, and you can connect to very different people in a short period of time. Even when we had our first conversation, it didn't feel like I was having a screening call for someone to come on a podcast. It felt like I was talking with a friend. This is the human skill. How did you develop that? Or is there a way to develop that? Or is it something just innate?
I don't think I have consciously developed that.
Okay.
You can call me a chameleon or whatever, but I think I'm quite consistent. And consistent in probably one thing, not 3 things. One thing is I'm genuinely interested in human beings. And I don't differentiate. For me, the driver or taxi driver or you or Mudassir is the same. For me, it's literally the same, right? So I really respect the person for who they are, what they do. And everyone wakes up in the morning and tries to make for a living, has a family somewhere to feed, or a parent he needs to like entertain, financially support, give medical care to, whatever it is. You don't know what people carry on their shoulders, right? So whoever I talk to, when I go to a restaurant, I memorize the name of waiters because I want them to feel human. And then you see it in the eyes, this like half a second spark that comes up. Literally, they shake their head like, okay, the guy called me by name. And, this half second makes them feel human. That maybe lasts for 1 or 2 hours of happiness. And I think my vision or my mission is I want more people happy. And I want more people to feel human. I think that's generally what drives me at the end of the day. I enjoy being with people. It's probably my extrovert personality type. And I enjoy seeing that how people benefit from my presence and draw energy from my presence, and the other way around as well.
For followership, having an impact and good communication skills is our deal.
I don't like good communication skills, sorry, but authentic communication probably. You might be extremely good at communications, but still not great followership because you're irrelevant in the topics that you talk about. Correct? I can talk about stuff that people don't care about, that is relevant today. You know, when people are dying everywhere, and I'm talking about entertainment parks, I'm probably not relevant, right? But when you talk about how to make things better for people who are dying because they're hungry, they're whatever, then you're probably relevant. If you communicated the same way, wouldn't explain it.
True. That's followership. Last one, execution.
There's an entrepreneurial spirit that you must have. And this entrepreneurial spirit makes you run, right? The master of execution for me is Cristiano Ronaldo. Someone like Cristiano, for example, right? Everything he does is to perfection whatever he needs to do in order to deliver. That's perfect execution. You put everything into place in order to deliver against the target that you have set. His target is to get on the pitch and deliver the best performance he can do. He optimizes sleep, he optimizes food, he optimizes practice, he optimizes his condition training, he optimizes his interaction with other humans, he optimizes his travel, he optimizes everything, every little tiny thing in order to get to that point. And I think that's perfect execution. Now apply that to what you're doing, right? Now, if you are an entrepreneur that, let's say, wakes up every morning around 8, 9, and you show up at 10 with your sunglasses into the office and you're like the cool guy because, hey, I'm the founder, you're probably not a great guy, right? But when you're a guy that wakes up at 5 a.m. and you get your stuff done and by 7 a.m. you're started to work and, you know, you force yourself to get out of the office no matter what at 6, 7 and you have dinner with your family, for example, you see your children, you get this emotional balance and then you restart again at one point. It probably helps you to keep this peak performance level on a much longer stint. And that's, for me, good execution. If you look at the long-term game and you optimize for this long-term game, it doesn't mean that there's certain situations where you have to manage peaks. You need to deliver these peaks as well, but you need to optimize for the long-term game and have enough capacity, emotional capacity and physical capacity to deliver the peaks. I think that's perfect execution. And again, if you look at football, and I keep giving this example, focus on winning the next game. You don't need to do anything. If you win the next game, you win the league, period, right? If you win the next game, you win the Champions League. If you win the next game, you win the World Cup. Every next game matters. So focus on the next game, but have enough ammunition, if you will, enough energy to go the full 9 yards until the end of the season. Now, if in season preparation you didn't do your work, you're not going to make it to the last game. You get injured, you get tired. But if you put in the effort in the beginning, you will outperform everyone else, like Cristiano Ronaldo. And on purpose, I mentioned him and not Messi, because that guy is known for working like... You should have seen the media in Europe, like how they slaughtered him because of going to Saudi Arabia.
Really?
Yeah, that guy is playing in an inferior league now. He's out. He's not going to perform. Every time he goes to Portugal and plays and leads the team at the age of 39 now or whatever he is, and he excels playing in this inferior league, as they call it, because they just envy that that guy is playing somewhere where he thinks he can support the project and earn a lot of money, right? And he still delivers because he didn't change any of his habits by not playing for a top European club like, well, Manchester United is not a top European club anymore, but let's say where he used to play before, Real Madrid. He now plays in Saudi Arabia, and I think it doesn't matter where he plays, the guy will always deliver excellent execution.
I love this analogy that you draw from sport, and something I need to ask you, why are the best business coaches they come from football.
Why do you have so many successful coaches coming from sports?
Yes, business coaches.
Yeah, I think it's very simple because they have this combination of consistent peak performance over time and playing in a team as part of a team, especially when they come from American football or from football or whatever. Playing as part of a team helps you understand team dynamics much, much, much better. When you are in a team where you have someone like Neymar, how do you handle a person like that? When you have someone like Mbappe, right? And on the same team as the Vinicius Junior, right? How do you manage this? I don't think any manager could manage this if his name was not Carlo Ancelotti, for example, right? Because you need to have this gray hair aspect in order to be able to put up with the crap, right? And I think managers coming from sports, they have seen all of this. They've seen the ego trips. They had to manage ego trips. They had to take the big names off and say, big name, you're a team member. So either you work as a team member or you're out, no matter how big your name is. The successful ones do this, actually. They shave off the guys that think they're bigger than the team, right? And then the second thing is, it's this concept of preparing pre-season to deliver the season, right? And think ahead, and you have tactics, you have strategy, you have tactics, you have preparation, you have the team component, you have preparing for each next game in an equally deep way. And I think all of this together is a perfect preparation for becoming a CEO, I think. And again, like everybody that asks me, how do I become a CEO? I'm like, dude, watch Jurgen Klopp. Or take a look at Carlo Ancelotti. There's two different styles, right? One of them is a CEO that is energetic, and one of them is a CEO that is sitting there, has a cigarette, and like, hey guys, run, right? But he gives you the degree of freedom that you need to perform, right? And then you take a look at Jose Mourinho. That guy excels in the first 1.5, 2 years, and then he has burnt his team, right? Because he works with threatening and he works with other techniques that I wouldn't employ. They would die for him in the beginning, but then no one else, like after a certain time, half of the team hates him. Half of the team still loves him because he prefers them, and the other half hates him. So there's a lot of learning coming from sports, and I think this is why business coaches coming from sports are especially successful.
But what I'm hearing is there is no secret thing that you can do to become an executor. There's a small increments that adds up over time. This is why you gave the Cristiano Ronaldo example.
Just get things done.
What does that mean?
It means when you have a task, like fill water in the glass, do it now. Don't wait for 2 seconds. But when you have a glass of tea that is about to get cold and an empty glass of water, you should drink the tea before it gets cold. So a good execution means you understand how to prioritize and you don't push things, right? You understand what is, ultimately, let's use frameworks again, right? Ultimately, it's importance and urgency. You need to understand that important and urgent is the most important and most imminent thing to do.
Eisenhower matrix.
Yes, exactly. So if you understand the Eisenhower matrix approach, then you probably are a good executioner. But then there are people that are just not good enough at the job. Like, get someone into a leadership position and tell them you need to have 150 people within end of the year, and they need to be outperforming. And it's June. There's maybe 2 people in the region that can do that. I can tell you that. So but if you get someone and say, hey, I want you to develop the best financial model for me by end of the year, and it's now 25th of December, there's probably many, many people who can do that, right? So again, this is why I say the people aspect is probably the most important thing about execution. Finding the right people, putting them in play in the right way, motivating them the right way, giving them the right vision, measuring their performance in a way that is not intrusive, setting targets that are not intrusive, that are set by themselves and they have buy-in into the targets. You can work with OKRs, big, nice concept. And I know you discussed it in your on your platform as well. I'm not a big fan.
Google does it, IBM does it, so must be nice, no?
It works. It works in certain settings. It works, yes. And I think it works. It's a universal technique that works in universal settings. But Google is a big corporate. It's not a startup, right? IBM is a dinosaur corporate, right? But when you have a small place of 100, 150 people, how do you push performance? How do you set targets? How do you measure targets? And how do you push performance in a consistent way? You could do it with OKRs and it can work. I think the better way to do it, and that's my personal thing, is have a bunch of leaders in the company that people love, literally love. Like when you have your direct reports loving you, they would do anything to not let you down. When these direct reports have direct reports that love them, they would do anything to not let them down. It's for me a far easier approach. So it all boils down to recruiting the right people.
Man, that's so...
Like in a football team, by the way. It's exactly the same thing. You have a manager like Jurgen Klopp, people would die for him. They would die for him, literally. They would run the 5 extra kilometers per game because of this gentleman. Correct?
Man, so I have hired several product managers in my team, and some product managers are very high performing, amazing, and there's one lady product manager, just her team love her. And they're willing, if there's an error, if there's a bug, they're willing to work overtime. They're willing to work on the weekends. And we don't have like work weekend swap policy. She's not maybe the best performer, but because she's really good and people love her, they're willing to go the extra mile for her. And her team always performs so well. So that's maybe...
You're giving me ammunition now. Because you said a couple of things where I'm like, oh my God.
Really?
Let's make this a coaching session now. First of all,
yeah.
Why do you say low performer? Or she might not be the best performer. How do you measure that? Now ask her team. Do you think ask every product manager's team to rate the product manager. She probably would have a higher score. So I think that's one dimension that you should never underestimate.
And I don't measure for.
What would people do for her? That's number one. Because skills, if there's like whatever, not data driven enough, right? Some of the product KPIs is not 100%, whatever. You can yourself. I mean, everyone talks about founder mode, right? So you jump in and you fix it yourself.
Yeah.
And if she's as good as her people think she is, it means she listens to her people. So even if she didn't listen to you, you would talk to her people and they would tell her this is a better way of doing it, and she would listen to them. Yeah. Probably. So you fix that aspect like this. But if she had a team that doesn't follow her, you would never be able to fix it without replacing her. So why did I catch this one? Because I had so many instances where people come to me and say, it doesn't perform. My answer is always, what have you not done? Or what have you done wrong? From the hiring process until now, what have you failed at? You personally, you're managing this person, right? And I ask myself the same question. Like when I find someone is not delivering what is expected or what he or she promised, I ask myself, what did I do wrong? And in 90% of the cases, is again, like matrix, right? Skill, will.
Yeah.
Like high skill, high will, perfect. Like the minimum that I look for is high will. Now, if you still have someone with high will, but the output is not good enough, then in 90% of the cases, you can assume that you're having a right wing playing central defense.
Okay.
Or you took Lionel Messi and put him as the goalkeeper. That's your fault as a manager. So the first thing you need to look at is on this pitch, you have 11 positions. Is this player in the right position? Is the composition of these 10 roles playing, take the goalkeeper out, is the composition of personalities the right composition? Because you've assembled that. Or have you made a mistake where two characters don't gel? Etc., etc. Are you role modeling enough? You tell people to run through the forest in the morning after a game, but you don't run with them. There's a couple of things, right? And I think that's the first thing I would look at. Next to how does the team perceive the leader is how have you positioned the leader to be able to deliver properly? Especially in product, by the way. If you are a leader and you don't jump, like I would consider myself always the first product guy in any company that I create, right? If I didn't have the energy level and the attention to detail to jump into the product to the deepest levels and the first probably half year of the product and even beyond, then I can't really manage product. I'll never be able to.
One of your people who used to report to you, I would ask about him. He was like, Mahmoud, he could be with Muhammad, talk about strategy and 5-year plan, and then he would be in a meeting talking about the button. A leader, a CEO should care about the button.
I think you need to understand at what time you have to care about the button. And I think the skill that you need to have as a CEO is this zoom in, zoom out, and the decision when to do that, right? Now take the example of a button color, right?
Yeah.
And let's take AlMosafer, for example, right? When Amazon changes all the buy now buttons to the color orange, they probably have a science behind it.
Yeah.
Right? They have run, or take booking.com. They run 2,000 concurrent experiments all the time. Now, when you see that they switch to yellowish orange and you're still on this green, ugly Kermit the Frog green, you need to ask this question, right? If your product team doesn't ask the question, you zoom in and you say, hey, dude, just like, have you A/B tested? Like, when's the last time you tested this? Have you tested the copy on the button? Have you tested the color of the button? How much traffic is on this page and how many people convert? What is the conversion rate? Oh, 1.1%? I don't know, but the industry standard is like 4.7% and booking is at 8%. Now, I don't expect us to be at bookings level, but I expect us to be at least at the industry level. So what are you doing in order to get there? You ask this question.
These are very specific questions.
It's not.
Oh, come on.
I don't think so. I think if you are unable to ask such question as a CEO, you shouldn't be a CEO. Because how can you have a direct report meeting with your head of product if you don't get this? Hey, how you doing? How was your week? You should run experiments all the time. And as a CEO, you need to understand which of them are most important. Now, what I'm saying is I zoom in to demonstrate to my team that at any point in time, they need to be ready to justify the decision-making process they do to me. Because I'm a crazy guy. I will zoom in at any point in time. I walk to the office. I don't have my own office. I sit outside in the middle of people. And I just walk to a desk and I show me what you're doing. Again, like rewind, I'm genuinely interested in people. I want to understand how they're working, why they're working, what drives them, and how they're improving mankind, how they're improving the product, how they're improving, how they're making it a more delightful experience. I'm really interested in that.
I'm thinking of what something like this does to a culture. I'm assuming that when you do that as a CEO, as a product manager, engineer, as executive, at every point of time, he needs to know that those questions need to be answered, and he need to know his numbers and why those decisions has been taken. Do you think in culture when you create those companies?
Yes. I think 80% of my time I spent on people and culture. What I'm saying is when you decide to make an investment in a human being, let's say you hire a head of people of culture, you hire someone like who you mentioned, Ronnie. You need to invest. You need to invest. The minimum you need to invest is upfront trust. The second thing you need to invest is maximum support to enable success, right? And the third thing you need to invest is effort to dive deep into problem solving when needed. And probably I forgot this point from my learnings from McKinsey. Very targeted problem solving. No matter which industry, sector, topic, you need to be able to dive deep, understand the problem, zoom out. Very, very early on. I think that's critical, right? And especially when it comes to recruitment, because you mentioned this example. What is more important than getting the right people into your business? What is more important?
As a CEO or a founder, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Right? So let's say you get funding. Let's say you got $10 million from someone and you put the wrong people on it. You will burn them in no time. That's a burden on my shoulder, like burning someone else's money without having the right people in place, right? And I think this is what makes or break a company at the end of the day. If you look at AlMosafer today, most of the people who are leading it today are people that I hired, right? And they outlived me because they were the right people from day one to run this company. And I made sure that they are the right people. At least if I was too dumb to see that that they were the right people, I was smart enough to see that I shouldn't stand in their way. And I think this is what makes a good CEO at the end of the day. You need to understand where your limitations are in driving the business operations versus driving vision and driving culture. And again, closing the circle, because this is where we came from, culture is what you should focus on. right? And I shouldn't mention this culture, eat strategy for breakfast, blah, blah, blah. It's all true. When you have lived it yourself, is the best strategy will not work if people are frustrated. No strategy will work if people despise the leader on top of them. But even a weak strategy will make you successful because people who love you will help you understand that you need to correct your execution, which we talked about earlier.
I want to double click on AlMosafer because AlMosafer is my favorite product company in the Middle East.
Mine too.
Really?
Of course.
Teresa Torres, in her book Continuous Discovery, she mentioned AlMosafer.
Can you imagine?
And she worked with you guys. Marty Keegan, in the latest book, he mentioned AlMosafer. You guys, nearly 1 billion in sales under your leadership. How does that happen?
How did this happen? There's a couple of components for success, I believe. And one of them is obviously the culture that we managed to build together. I think that's crucial because the culture still exists today, I think, to a large degree. There's obviously variations after I left and it became its own living organism, but I think it's still there. That's one component. The second component obviously is the mix between the persons backing it, which is the Al-Tayyar group back then, or Sira group today, and especially Abdullah Dawood, who was the one driving factor behind it. The guy is, I would say without hesitation, the best person I worked with in the Middle East in terms of vision, in terms of how bold he is and drive things that he believes in, and the long-term vision specifically, and investing really without hesitation into what he believes is right, and the degree of freedom that we had to execute. And I think this culture of giving at each level a degree of freedom for people to run and execute, this is what made this a truly entrepreneurial place, especially in product, right? If you take a look at the guys who drove product primarily after I left, like I think I set the foundation, but then after I left, it really became excellent, right? And the excellence came from this combination of two persons at the end of the day. One of them is Ronnie, who you rightfully say is an outstanding, and I would say hands on, this is my best hire that I've ever made in the MENA region. And the second person is Qais.
Qais, yes.
And these two in combination are phenomenal, right? And even after I left, I've been hearing from people on the inside like how great it is to work with those guys and see this tandem of thought process. And
very different personalities as well.
Unbelievable, but they gel, right? And they've created an outstanding product. And the vision when we started this whole thing is we had two things on our minds. First of all, why don't we have a product that is a genuine Middle Eastern product that can compete with one of the world's leaders, like Booking or Expedia? That's number one. And number two, I don't like, until today, any of the user interfaces out there, any of the UXs out there, as much as I like the one that we have built. In terms of simplicity, I like the simplicity of the product, even until today.
So I think one of your superpower is recruiting, and there's a lot of executives that you hired. I know that you don't like to mention their names because you don't want to take the credit, but now are leading big companies in the MENA region and internationally. And even, I mean, Ronnie was very transparent when he came on the podcast to mention, he was like, my resume, I don't know exactly what they saw in me. And he did phenomenally well. How, you mentioned that you screen for certain criteria, but some people do not have skill. How would you know, like, yes, those will be phenomenal in the job?
Let's take Ronnie as an example. Now, I sat with him, I think, he was an introduction by a friend from Accenture who knows him, who knew him from before. Met with him, zero expectation, outside the office in a very casual setting. And we sat there for 3 hours plus, I think. And had a conversation. Open. And I think my afternoon was full of meetings, which I canceled on the fly, like literally. First of all, he was a very genuine character. That's number one. Number two, he didn't come across as someone who was like highly aggressive or highly like pushy or like someone that you would say, okay, he's an alpha, and you bring him in and he will pick up stuff and he'll get things done. And that, he had 2-3 things that struck me in our conversation. Number one is he's candid from A to Z. He wouldn't shy away from telling you what he believes is true at any point in time. And I think that's a characteristic that very few people have. Everyone tries to, circumvent the truth to a certain degree until it's inevitable anymore, and then they talk about it. He doesn't have that. Number two, he is warm. Like you sit with him and you feel like, ooh, that guy caught me. Like somehow he caught me, right? And back then there was a product leader that we had who was not ready to be a product leader. And I wanted Ronnie to coach him on a personal skills level. And Ronnie was much more senior. And I was like, hey, would you be willing to work under this guy and help me coach him? And you're 100% better than him in many skill dimensions that I would need for this role. But you would work under him, and I can't tell you whether you would get his job or not ever. Like, because I want to push the guy. He's a young kid, 27 years old. He's been with me in 2 startups before. And I'm committed to this person to make him better. Would you be willing to earn much less money than what you deserve? Because I don't have the budget, but this is the only role I can envision creating for you right now. And I want you to work with me. And he said yes. Now, saying yes in a situation like that tells you a lot about a person. Number one is, he has 0 ego. 0.
True.
And someone like me with such a big ego, sitting with someone with such a small ego, he made me feel this small. Like, I'm like, whoa. How would I have reacted? I would probably have stood up and say, hey, dude, who do you think you're talking to? Right? And what he did is he's like, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe we can help him. Like, he started problem solving on how to help the guy. And he never met the guy.
Yeah.
So number one is his ego was not in his way, 0 ego. Number two, he was genuinely thinking about how to help a person he didn't even meet yet. Oh. Now, when you think product, and I knew he didn't have the product skill set, like whatever. But first of all, he was curious, so he would learn. This is easy, right? Second of all, what matters most in terms of product, in my view, is the human interface. No matter what. And in order to create great human interfaces, regardless of the data-driven approach that you have to take, you need to love the humans that you serve with the product. And he showed that. He loves the humans that he serves. And what else do you need for a product guy? You need someone that is outstanding at comprehending people's feelings, someone who respects people's feeling, someone who doesn't put himself on top of others, and someone who is intelligent enough to learn any skill set. I could have put him, probably not hardcore coding, but anything else, and he would have excelled. I was convinced that bringing him into the business is a no-regret move. And I wanted to buy time. I think the second role that I had envisioned for him is my head of staff.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Or chief of staff. Like someone that I can put into different areas to figure out what he likes most and then make him run this area, whatever it is. So there was a couple of things. And the guy accepted to work under a guy who was immature and coach him. And he did that until that guy grabbed the job for 5,000 dirhams more a month and left. And then he became head of product, and then he took it from there. But when I find someone that really strikes me, I try to get these people into the company no matter what. And I'll create the budget, I'll create whatever in order to make this happen. Why? Because I truly believe that, again, the mix of people that you have is the right thing to carry your company to success. And I think AlMosafer is the best example. The mix of people made the difference, made all the difference.
You have started and scaled so many startups, and even there's one startup that you started with your wife, which we didn't have time to go into it right now as well. What are the major lessons learned from founding and scaling all those multiple businesses? What are I'm trying to look for patterns.
I think it's a summary of what we discussed, right? Number one is, as a founder, set the vision. Number one. Number two, be the first chief human resource officer, chief people officer, call it whatever you want. Be the first people person and remain the people person until the end. And the third thing is be the first product guy and remain this product guy for at least half a year, until you have a product organization that can stand on its own feet. But be able to jump into product at any point in time, into the details of product at any point in time.
What's exciting for you in the first 1,000 days of a startup?
I think laying the people foundation of a business is what excites me most. Like when you get there, you have this concept, and then you come in, you're like, okay, I'm in an empty room. Maybe we're 2 or 3 people at that time. And you're like, okay, I already have, again, like think of me as a football manager then. I'm like, okay, I have to assemble a soccer team right now, and I need 11 players, 11 substitutes. I need a coaching team, the staff, etc. And then you play this, you really plan out this puzzle and you put it forward, and then you create the idea of how you want to play. And then you start, communicating this idea to people that you onboard as you go, and then you see that they adopt this idea, and then you develop it further, and then half a year later you look back and you're like, wow, the original idea changed a lot. And then you see the people, the power that you have, the energy level that you have in the room now. That is the most exciting bit. And you could stop actually at one point after probably the first year, let's say 350, 400 days, because you would have laid a solid foundation. But then the excitement comes then, because then the real challenges of scaling come, right? I always say it's very easy to scale from 0 to 100 people, but then from 100 to 250, 300 people, that's more challenging, because then you have management mechanisms and management layers that you need to establish that don't break your culture, right? And a lot of large companies have not managed to create successful cultures. Then in the middle management layer, you see the founders are super visionary, super positive, but then you have a management layer that is highly political. And then you have like people on the ground that admire the founders, but they hate the middle managers. And I think this challenge is an amazing one. I'm not going to mention examples.
I know exactly the same company. What qualities are essential for a successful CEOs?
Selling. I think you need to be able to communicate like a salesperson with a vision. Not a transactional salesperson, a salesperson with a vision. You need to be razor sharp in terms of your analytics.
That data matters.
Anything you do needs to take all available data into account, analyze it in a fast way and in a thorough way. And the third thing I would say is, despite all the data that you have and despite all the selling that you do, you need to trust your gut at the end of the day when you take decisions, especially about people.
You should listen to your intuition?
Yes. I give you a very concrete example, right? When, fundraising is one of those things. Like, let's say you have 3 term sheets and your gut tells you that you don't want to work with this person. There's one instance where I still signed a term sheet, although it was yelling at me that you don't like this person. Turned out it killed the business. When you don't gel with a person, especially despite the fact that commercial terms are beneficial or seem beneficial to you, it's not going to play out well. I think it's very obvious. And this is why I say, like, trust your gut. My gut was always right so far. I think there's some instance where I didn't listen to my gut and I was wrong. Some instance I could correct that later, but trust is super important. Gut is super important. Data is super important. And when you combine them, I think you have a powerful mix.
How do you hone a good intuition?
I like the question, but I think you can't. But what I think you can say about this is, over time, I mean, you develop as a person, and when you develop gray hair and mileage, you collect mileage, you know whether you should take this bumpy ride or not. Like when you're an 18-year-old kid with a 911, you go full speed wherever you are, right? When you're a 40-year-old man with a 911, you know that the bumpers are probably not to be taken at 140, 150. Like it doesn't work.
How do you navigate cultural differences while working with diverse team across Europe, MENA? How do you manage that? Especially when creating products that serve multiple people and multiple regions.
It's funny that you say that, because as a product guy, right? I mean, let's take Sukkar.com, right? E-commerce in fashion, low-cost fashion, right? Driven by discounts. We ran so many tests where you say, here's button red, here's button green. Buy now, buy now. You ran an experiment 10 times. 10 times it has the opposite answer. The opposite answer, it's not statistically relevant, because the audience is so different all the time here. It's so heterogeneous, it's irrational. And I find it quite difficult after my McKinsey stint to really base decisions on data, because the quality of the data that you would gather yourself, and I'm talking first level data that you gather yourself, was not good enough, because it was contradicting. Like, I mean, there's no bigger difference than red button, green button. And you ask the same 1,000 people 10 times, and they give you 10 different answers. And that was astonishing to me. And that, I think, highlights the difficulty of product, specifically in the Middle East, right? And when you look at the population, let's say, of UAE, specifically Dubai, because that's the core market here, right? I mean, you have less than 10% locals, I think, right? You have, again, less than 10%, no, probably 10% to 12% Arabic expats, right? You have Western expats, 10%. You have Eastern direct hires of 60% that are in low wage jobs. And then you have Asian expats most of the time, and African expats. Who do you want to cater to, right? Now, what you do is, if when you do market segmentation properly, you do it based on behaviors, not based on demographics, right? And when you do behavioral targeting, and you take a 25-year-old Western expat, 25-year-old Arab expat, 25-year-old African expat, 25-year-old Korean expat, the behaviors are different. 100% different, right? So how do you cater? And that's, I think, that's something that is extremely challenging, especially in the UAE market. When it gets to Saudi, it's a little easier, right? It's easier to segment based on behaviors there, because you have many more Saudis, like local Saudis, and you can cater to their needs in a much more efficient way. And I think that's also why AlMosafer then at the end of the day focus on Saudi predominantly, because it's much easier to target the audience and the segment that you want. You want like either the frugal buyers, or you want the high net worth buyers, and you want to figure out how their behaviors differ and then target them accordingly. That's much more difficult in UAE. It's a much more competitive market here as well.
So you mentioning navigating the cultural differences based on the clients and the product that you're creating. Mm-hmm. But what about the employees that you hire? Because a product manager in Germany is going to approach problem different than a product manager in the UAE than a product manager in the States.
Oh, yes.
Product manager in the States, love them dearly, but they think too much big manager. Vision. Yeah, product manager in big Germany, vision. They're very...
The Germans are very structured.
Oh, I love product managers in Germany. Shout out to my friends. I love them.
Yes.
And unfortunately, and I'm shooting myself in foot here, product managers in this region like to be told what to do.
Again, it's take the football team. Right? Again, when you have the right mix, it works. The right mix needs to have, let's say, a football team has an axis starting with the goalkeeper, one central defender, one central midfielder, and the forward. If this works, they will guide the people surrounding them. Your job as a CEO or as a trainer of such a team is to figure out this axis. It's all you need to do. You need to figure out this axis so they become the coaches to everyone surrounding them. That's component number one. Component number two, again, what we talked about before, me as a CEO, being the first product guy on the team for the first year, for example, I need to be able to zoom in to the lowest level of the product. And I don't care what nationality sits there, what background sits there. There's a certain way of doing things, right? And this certain way is, that's the customer. The customer is on top of everything. How do you serve the customer best, right? And then we get there. Now, if someone has a different approach to serving customers best than looking at data in product, we have an issue, right? And then it's the people surrounding that person, teaching them how to do that. And if you don't have initiative, because what you mentioned right now is people need to be told what to do. Now, I've seen that, but very rarely in my own organizations, because that's literally what I filter for, right? When I have my interviews, I'm always like, there's no one who enters my company without me interviewing, right? Either the first or the last interview, because I want to understand this aspect of personality amongst other things. Like, is this someone that I need to tell what to do? Like, one of the things that I do is I drop stuff on the table ahead of an interview, pen case. A very old trick. If I come back to the room, I guess I'll get you water. I come back and the pens are still there. It's the wrong person. You know it. Because they don't care about details. They don't care about initiative. They think it's not their own place, etc., 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 right? So there are certain things you need to test for. And one of the things you need to test for is this someone that is self-run, or is this someone that needs a leash? Someone that is remote controlled, with a wired remote control even. And I've suffered from this in the beginning. When I came to the MENA region, 2003, I'm like, dude, like, you need to tell this person to breathe, otherwise they will forget to breathe, right? And I used to blame them for that until I understood that they were told to not think their whole life. They were told there's a white man that outsmarts you, that thinks on your behalf, and you have to do as told. And that is, and I'm not talking like now, I'm talking like over centuries they have been told that. And it's in their system. Like, and I'm not talking on subcontinent, I'm talking even the Arabic world. This is what we've been told for ages, that there are people that are better than you that tell you what to do. There are people that make more money than you, that you depend on, so shut up and do your job, right? And don't even think. If I want you to think, I would tell you, right? Right? There's the saying, higher paid wisdom. That's how they call managers, right? No, I think this concept of like money and gender and race and God knows what defines whether you have this place at the table, this decision maker space on the table or not. I think this concept is wrong. So how do I make sure this doesn't happen? I make sure that I hire the right people. Again, it all boils down to recruitment. And I live this culture, role model this culture.
Hired someone, really good CV, very good interview. The thing that they lacked was ownership, and I don't know how to teach or coach ownership, and it affected the whole team. And after a while, I should have dealt with the situation sooner. How do you know what's time to let go of an employee? It's part of CEO job. You have done it very early on in your career when you were 24.
That's a tough question. It's probably the toughest question today. Because at the end of the day, you're looking at human lives, right?
Yes.
That's number one. Number two, you're looking at your own mistakes because you hired that person. You don't want to admit to yourself that this is wrong, right? And the third thing, or it's twisted upside down again, football team. You have a guy who doesn't run enough. You have statistics. On average, the team runs 110 kilometers a game. When this guy plays, they run 102. So there's one issue. Everyone else is suffering because of one player, right? What do? The first thing as a manager, you go pick this person, you're like, dude, look at the statistics. Here's facts. Fact number one, fact number two, fact number three. These people are all suffering because of your behavior. How can I help you? Or what is hindering you from giving me the maximum? What is hindering you? Is there anything I can do to help you get there? Have this conversation constructively. First time. Second time, you're like, hey, we had this conversation. Here's the data. It didn't change. So apparently we are running into an issue. Now, I'm giving you another 4 weeks to tell me that you deserve being part of this team, because this team is a privilege to you. And this is the way I see the cultures that we built, is it's a privilege to be part of this culture. If you feel that this is a privilege and this person is abusing the privilege, then don't think of this person after you've given enough feedback. This is always, and not only feedback and coaching, right? This person is harming the rest. Now, you don't want one rotten tomato to create 10 rotten tomatoes, right? It's very simple. Now, at the same time, I always say I never micromanage. And the moment I have to do that, you know that this is your path to exit. I tell my people in the hiring, like there's a couple of things I tell them in the onboarding process. I said, look, there's one thing I hate most. This is when someone micromanages me. And there's one thing I hate even more than that. That's when I have to micromanage someone else, because it means I lose my respect. The moment you get into this mode where I have to micromanage you, something went fundamentally wrong. So don't get there. Everything else is fixable, but the moment you get micromanaged, the likelihood of you leaving the firm is probably 95%. Because this means you have had your feedback from your colleagues, from your peers, from your direct manager, from HR, from myself multiple times before it gets to a mode where things go out. Now, this sounds like a year-long process. My probably most important advice is don't wait with that. So if someone doesn't deliver within 4 weeks, have a very candid conversation. Give 4 weeks to show a different behavior. If different behavior doesn't come, give another 4 weeks max with a very clear warning. So you have had 3 months. After 3 months, you give 4 weeks, and then it's exit.
Again, so 3 months, then 4 weeks?
I'm human now. If you don't have cash to sustain that, I would say after 3 months out. Just hardcore out. And communicate that upfront, very transparently. If you're a football player in a team and you don't run, what you will do is you will not even be on the bench. Right or not? You will not even be part of the squad anymore. People will take you out. And people need to know that upfront. I always say when you're transparent enough upfront, it's very fair. But when you surprise people and say, hey, I've been observing you, you're not good enough. Thank you, goodbye. That's when your culture is killed, right? But when everyone knows, invested personal time as a leader to coach this person and to really try to help as much as you can, and you ask others to co-help with you, and it still doesn't work, then we're talking skill-will matrix, and the will is not there. When the will is not there, there's no way for you to fix it, no matter what you do.
You mentioned the frameworks that you usually use. One is the Eisenhower matrix. I love it since I read it in the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And 2, will and skill. What else that stuck with you using those frameworks? 3 things. Anything else?
I could come up with 20 frameworks probably, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Really, it doesn't matter. I think what matters is focus on the person in front of you at any point in time. That's the most important framework for me. Just look into the person's heart. I would never have hired Ronnie, that you mentioned so many times today, rightfully so. I would never have hired him if I hadn't looked in his heart.
As a leader, should I play on my strength or should I improve my weaknesses?
Strength. You will never make a difference on your weaknesses. You will make a difference on your strength. When you're a good salesperson, sell. Sell the hell out of it. Simple example. You're not really good as a goalkeeper, but you're best forward in town. What should you do? Improve your goalkeeper skills? I'm serious. Will you ever make a difference as a goalkeeper?
At all. 0.
Yeah. Even as a defender, central defender, you will never make a difference. Even as a defensive midfielder, you will never make a difference. Maybe as a number 10, you would make a difference.
Being an entrepreneur is challenging enough, and especially in the Middle East. where market sizes are smaller and unique difficulties exist. What motivated you to stay here and build business in the region?
I had the opportunity to move to Silicon Valley right after university, and I didn't take it. There were parts or phases in my life where I regretted it. But if I look back today, I would say I simply didn't have the passion for a country like the US. Being born and raised in Europe, in Germany specifically, if I look at it today, and I tried it, the last 2 years I lived in Germany and I tried to do stuff in Germany, and I don't have a passion for it anymore. What I do have is a passion for this region, because I see that in the last 60, 70 years, we have been abused. We have been exploited. We have been so much, despite all the potential we have in this region, despite all the leaders coming from this region, outside of this region. And I'm an entrepreneur here probably for the same reason that other entrepreneurs here are, right? And we've mentioned Kareem, for example. We want to create something here that gives people hope and gives people something to look up to so that they can do the same. As simple as that. And if you do tiny bits of, seeding certain people that create cultures that are similar to the cultures that you have built, that create outstanding companies, then you've contributed a little bit to a better future of the children of this region. And I think there's no better time to do that than now. Really build stuff in the Middle East in areas that are still not taken on a global stage. There's so much innovation coming. We're accelerating innovation like never ever before in the world. And the Middle East is playing a significant role because we're investing also finally our oil money and our gas money into infrastructure, into innovation, etc. So what will come out of the Middle East has potential now to put us in a leadership role in the world again. And I think this is why this is the most exciting region in the world right now, ahead of China, ahead of Russia, ahead of the US, ahead of Europe. I don't know about Africa yet. I think it's still where the Middle East has been 30 years ago, but it's coming. But at the moment, the MENA region is the most exciting region, despite all the challenges that we have.
How do you stay resilient and go for the next thing and next thing and the next thing?
I think it's this hunger for impact. It's like you want to move the needle for people, as many people as possible. I think that's what drives you when you like, I want to create something that people use on a daily basis. And I want to create something, especially now, I want to create something out of the Middle East that people in all parts of the world will use. A brand coming out of the Middle East that is big enough to cover the globe.
That's a big vision.
Anything that comes from here that people in the world would use. Right? I don't know of any example yet.
Your brothers are successful entrepreneurs as well. I'm just curious. I don't know if you can teach entrepreneurship to kids. What's the secret sauce that your parents did?
Believe in yourself is one thing.
Okay.
And whenever I wanted stuff, the answer was go do it yourself.
Okay.
Right? Now I see parents today, kid falls down, oh no. And they let them. I'm like, dude, let him fall so he learns how to stand up. Right? Or like they literally run behind the kid and they cover all the corners so that they don't. If you don't hit your head, you don't feel pain. If you don't feel pain, you get surprised when you feel pain when your parents are not around. Right? Then if you don't get this exposure to so many different things, you will never be able to push boundaries. You'll never become curious enough because you're not allowed to be curious. No, don't do this, don't do that, right? And this is a big mistake of current generation of whatever I call it, left radical parenting, is protect kids from anything, right? But this will not allow them to grow. So I'm so grateful for my parents to have allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do. And whenever I was lazy, they told me, don't be lazy. If you're lazy, you don't get what you want. Just do it. And I saw how my dad created a company that went bankrupt and how he reinvented himself at the age of 46.
Oh, wow. That's very inspiring.
Yeah, that was a game changer, I would say, for me. It's the first time I tell this story, I think. But that was a game changer for me because he was a journalist who decided at one point he creates a company, right? And he had high will, zero skill. And Didn't go very well, and it hit the family very, very hard. But it shaped something, right? And this thing, like, I'm going to do this. And I think I studied business because of that. Again, my amateurish psychoanalysis, right? But I studied business probably because of my dad's failure in business. And that taught you also a lesson, that there are certain ways of doing things. If you don't learn them the hard way, you're not going to learn them. You need to invest into learning techniques in order to do stuff the right way. You need to put in energy, and there's always a way out. This when people come to me and ask for coaching, and I get this quite often actually, and my first question when people ask me, shall I do? My first question is, what's the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is you go and work as a waiter in a restaurant. That's the worst case scenario. You lose your job, you reinvent, you stand up, you recover, you start from scratch. I've done it myself multiple times. Right? You mentioned the startup with my wife. Like, I think when I had to shut it down, I think I had $350,000 debt. I had no health insurance. My wife was in her 9th month, no health insurance. Our rent had expired. Our landlord didn't want to extend, etc., etc. And here I am today, right? And I think it's always possible. And but what drives you is impact, I think, and what nurtures you is usually your parents and the environment that you grew up in.
How can me or the rest of our audience here can help support your vision? How can be of assistance or help you?
I think what's missing here, and we always talk about the tech ecosystem in MENA. I don't think there's a tech ecosystem in MENA. When you take a look at the PayPal mafia or all the other mafias in the US, for example, that's how an ecosystem works. You don't have that to this extent here. That's number one. And number two is you don't have a VC or investment ecosystem here that is functional, right? You don't have the quality of people. Very, very few people I would consider high quality in the VC ecosystem or in the investment ecosystem. You have a couple of angel networks now that are quite nice, but very few are bold. Very few want to take on the world. So how can you support? I think it starts with getting the right mindset of people into one room. So whoever has the mindset of, you know what, I have a certain idea and I think it has the potential of conquering the world. Or conquering, usually it starts with like someone comes to me with a business idea and a business plan, and it ends at the border of Sharjah. It's like, that guy's like, okay, why don't you take it beyond? Like, that's my first question. Yeah. And then you spend like 3-4 weeks coaching and mentoring, and then the business plan increases from a 10 million business plan with a 10 million potential exit to a multi-100 million business case, right? And only by looking beyond the horizon of your neighborhood, right? And I think what you can do, for example, when you come across people that have this special thing, and you will notice that when you talk to them, like, man, you should meet this person. You should meet that person. That's what I do, for example. I introduce people to each other without getting anything, apart from having connected two great persons. And I think this connecting people without expecting anything in return, making warm introductions, is probably the first thing that needs to be fixed here in the region. Making warm introductions all the time without asking for anything in return. That's number one. Number two, stop ghosting. The biggest complaint that I get from anyone in the startup ecosystem is 99% of people here ghost you, even people you know, that you meet the next day, the next month, the next year, like, hey, dude, hey, how are you doing? And you're like, hey, I'm doing not so well because you ghosted me for a year and now you're telling me how you do. Don't ghost me. If you want to ghost me, don't talk to me when you meet with me, right? And this happens so often. I think when this bad habit, and I get it, people are busy. I respond to every single message on LinkedIn.
Oh, wow.
Right? And trust me, I have hundreds of messages, right? But I think of myself, let's say I lost my job. I'm on a relatively medium salary. I lost my job. I have 3 kids. I have to pay school fees. I'm desperate. I want to get help in finding a job. I reach out to a guy that is visible in media and I ask for help, and this guy doesn't respond. How would I feel?
Shit.
How would you feel when someone reaches out that you admire, or when you reach out to someone you admire and this person doesn't respond? Oof. That's for me, like, this is why I always say also, I get invitations to speak publicly that I reject most of the times, because I always say it's a responsibility. When you have the ability to speak in public, it's a big responsibility, and it doesn't end with you walking off the stage, getting all this fame, right? It is a responsibility. You attract followership. And when you attract followership, you're in charge of your followership. You have to serve them. You have to give them what you promised on stage or in a podcast like that. This is why I reduced all my appearances to a certain degree, because I didn't feel I had enough energy to commit for a certain period of time. Now I have a little bit more energy, so I'm doing this more frequently, but it's a commitment. So honor the commitment.